I call this meeting to order. June 2nd, Jack Hopkins Social Service Grant Committee. I just distracted myself with my own to-do list in my book here. Our debrief session. So, how'd it go, everybody? Any thoughts? So should we start from the beginning of the process and walk through, or does anybody just have thoughts off the top of their head?
I mean, the rubric was the only thing that kind of gave us fits, right? And I think we just need to tighten up scoring for next year, for either for us or for whoever else kind of takes over.
Agreed.
But other than that, and when we went over the rubric and Catherine's stuff was written over, right? That was problematic, but
it was.
Other than that, I think it went pretty well.
Yeah, I feel like most of our pains were just because there wasn't a staff.
That's what I think that rubric, most of the rubric stuff came from. So I think that was just unfortunate timing. I mean, I want to say I think that the support that we did have, everybody chipped in, and the fellows, the interns, clerk's office, Larry, and even you guys, everybody just jumping in and trying to save the day. That was remarkable. It was really, really, really helpful and crucial. So thank you, everybody. What did you think about the new application this year? Like how that was a very different format, different layout than
as far as
previous years.
Digesting it as a committee, I thought that was great because it was a lot for pages upon pages of stuff, so I thought that was an improvement.
I think as relates to our rubric, it was fantastic because most 98% of the information we needed was there, super accessible.
Yeah.
I found the budgets really hard to access and kind of annoying that you had to click on to something else, right? So
there was one budget that I'm not sure, I can't remember whose it was, but I didn't discover until the final hour that I couldn't see, didn't have access to their budget, which I feel like that was another thing. If we had the OG staff that was in there, they would have known things that didn't work before we got to it.
But I feel like it would. You could make one change to that form, which has a summary, a summary line for budget or something. In the past, we used to get that information. It was can you get without funding? And then it's sort of but where is the natural place to cut? So we could see that in the summary. I think they could pretty easily add that to the form. I think would be helpful, just at the top level, so you can sort of see. The summary of the budget, and then we can dig down or something like that. But.
This was also an annoying nitpicky thing, and maybe I had the view wrong, but we're not being able to see which application you were clicking on.
Yes.
It was annoying, having to go through and be okay, is this the right one,
Just
took a while to figure out that you could export them all.
Yeah.
But when you export them all, it was
it was still a mess. And
yeah.
Sorry. I write slow.
Yeah, I feel like something that would be nice is if next year we were able to have staff or one of the fellows or whatever download all of that data and then clean it up for us and then share it all to us in a spreadsheet. Then I feel like that would mitigate some of those issues too, because it was kind of the system's kind of a pain.
I know that Aria had done a lot of work putting stuff into the spreadsheet for us, but it wasn't everything that we needed for the rubric, but it was a really tremendous start getting us started. I'm really happy with the new application. I think
That's definitely better.
Kari did a great job getting that put together for us, and it's so much easier than digging through all of this. You're right, because it was sheets and sheets of papers that we were scrolling through constantly to try to get all the information we needed to grade them.
I'm guessing that it was easier for applicants because it seemed like, for the most part, the majority of them were hitting a lot of things we were asking for, as opposed to a couple years ago where it seemed like applications were incomplete because they misunderstood the application. I'm inferring, but we had some incomplete stuff that just didn't make sense why it was incomplete as opposed to this year. So
I think there were some things from last year's feedback that we never really tried or even talked about really, like whether last year we had all recommended exploring the idea of like having like a bipartite fund, like where we basically had like, fund for big asks and then fund for, like more specific things or something like that, or like where we came up with a set of high level targets that we were going to prioritize for this year. I do think that's worth including again in the report, because I do think those are some ideas that are worth us exploring, and I also think the idea of figuring out how to combine, whether with CDBG processes or with whatever the county's Sophia Travis processes, I still think is just an area that we need to do something about.
I was just about to ask something, and it's gone.
It's all right.
It happens. This wasn't it, I don't think. But what about the how we held the follow-ups with those that we asked coming in? Do we still think that's the way to go? Does it unfairly bias us against the people who came in versus the people who we didn't ask in?
I don't think so, because someone who came in didn't get funded.
Yeah.
I think that was helpful to us. I don't think it's necessarily a bias. Isak didn't make it in person to that one, and it was probably a recipient that I wanted to ask questions, but they answered the questions that were given to them, but that opened up more questions, but I didn't think it was fair for me to grill them on things that they may have been unprepared for.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to open that up to make it fair. Just
Yeah.
And they ended up getting partially funded, I think, very generously. So I'm fine with that. But I think that what we're doing is okay.
So just thinking out loud, but this was a thought that I had that I think is worth us developing, which is perhaps there's an interface between our rubric, the application, and the interviews, and then our responsibility. And perhaps we're being a little bit too, I don't know, I'm going to say this as I'm just thinking out loud. I don't necessarily, so don't hold me to the exact words, but to the spirit of it. Like, is it worth us thinking about the fact that if we're having a lot of people that we need to do interviews with in the first place, in the past, the interviews served the function, which was give people more time on the mic, right? And it was sort of an expo, if you will. If we're moving away from that and towards a evaluative purpose, to your question about fairness, if we're having to ask for interviews, is that failure is a strong word, but is that like a failure of us as evaluators, or is it a failure of our application system, right? Or is it a failure of the people who are applying? And the answer, I think, changes what we're doing with interviews, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think that I've come at it from the perspective of it being a failure of those applying, in essence, that I'm like, I want to give you every possible chance to answer all the questions that we need answered so that we can evaluate you correctly. But there's a possibility that it's more like, we don't know enough about these organizations or something like that, and that's why we're having to ask, sometimes some of the questions we're asking are kind of basic. Or there's a possibility that the way we're evaluating them in the first place, like that our rubric is missing something that ends up creating a disadvantage for particular applicants, because whatever we're looking for is not clearly aligned with what we're asking for on the application. So
I saw it as a mixture of both.
Right.
You know, at times it was a failure on their part to communicate clearly, but at times I think it was a failure on maybe our part to understand their organization or to, you know, because for example, we made a rule right at the very get-go. If they have not applied to us before, we're inviting them in.
Like new organizations.
Yeah. I do think, you know, to your point about, well, there was one that didn't get funding at all. I think there were a couple of them that actually their presentation, not many, but there were a couple where it did actually dissuade me from maybe granting as much as I might have hoped to go, oh, I see this a little more clearly now. I don't know that I think this is as important.
But maybe my argument is that interviews should be a somewhat neutral thing.
How so? Like, how make it?
Well, like
neutral?
they shouldn't sway us this way or that way. They should
Right.
be things that are being used for clarifying. And, you know, and again, I mean.
But the act of
but then it's like-
clarifying will sway us.
Right, but if we're using a rubric, then swaying shouldn't be part of the conversation. So that then gets me back to the point of like, we still need to, you know, again, I think it's awesome that we're starting to use a rubric. I think the way we're using a rubric is very useful in the sense that it gives us sort of a common comparator. So I think that's why, one of the reasons why our meetings go well and smoothly, because we're all starting from the same place, and then we can discuss and change each other's minds, and, you know, adding that human element I think is tremendous. But I just wonder if that gives evidence to the fact that we want to tighten a little bit, you know, what the rubric is. I don't know. I mean,
You know, you mentioned earlier about small grants versus large grants and having two separate, but maybe we should look at, I mean, I'm not sure, like, off the top of my head, there were a number of new folks, right? Maybe we should be dividing the grants from people who've applied, traditional organizations, and then brand new, innovative, blah, 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 right? Or people who haven't applied for a while, and then kind of gives them a playing field that might be more level for those newer folks versus the organizations that have demonstrated need and success in their field. So just a thought.
Wait, in that like breakdown, do you feel like the newer ones
Maybe new
are less
ones.
likely to get funded, or
No, well,
because I don't feel like that influences our decision as much. Like I think in some grant
Yeah.
settings it does, but I feel like we're really great about not looking at like longevity as like.
I think we are, but, you know, like Isak was saying, you know, part of the interview process was bringing in new people, introducing themselves, talking about a new project or something. It might give more justification to how we conduct the interview process, like one where people are showcasing new things,
I
right?
see what you're saying,
Yeah, and then of course there could be a second interview process for people who need to clarify on some things because their application was confusing or unclear or whatever.
That kind of touches on something that I felt like was like a tension point for me this year, which was like we talk about not wanting to be relied on for as a funding source for like the same things year to year, but we do have like certain groups that are literally applying for the same thing every year, to your point, and it's like and it doesn't mean those needs don't matter, but we do kind of like try to discourage that in our eligibility requirements. I just don't know where that line is, like
Yeah,
I guess
we
it's the
should-
point of like tightening the rubric too.
Maybe we should change our eligibility requirements because the needs of the community seem to be greater and probably data will show that. So, you know, good job, organization A who applies every year. They're going through funding changes and they're serving more people. I don't know if we can really say that we want to discourage funding those folks
Yeah.
because they're still helping a lot of people, and if they don't get that funding, then they
Exactly.
help less people, right?
I think that's the hard
Yeah.
part about like the demographic like recipients that we're, or applicants that we're serving, is that across the board, like maybe that operational funding piece doesn't matter as much. Like we're not looking at like arts organizations, you know, where they feel like the argument's different.
I wonder, okay, so like being super provocative and knowingly being provocative, that like if you thought of the, I mean, and for context and for the record, you know, Councilmember Morello and I have both advocated, I think Councilmember Daley has as well, for increasing this fund to $1 million, for example. I think that our needs, you know, far outweigh, you know, and I think we could do more transformative things that are, okay, but being provocative, if you look at the types of things we're funding, to your point, versus what we could do as a city towards a lot of these issues with $500,000. So like just with this one example, you know, we're having these discussions through the Heading Home initiative of you know, basically funding for 1 year, you know, unsheltered homeless people, people experiencing homelessness who are also unsheltered, for giving them a year of housing that's funded. That would cost about $500,000, right? And so might we address the types of issues as sort of as a collective in a way that we're not really doing by giving, you know, 27 organizations $5,000.
It's just those needs wouldn't disappear, but just because there was like.
But my point is that a lot of them are recurring needs, and right, and so right.
But like that's like big on the assumption side
yeah,
too.
Of course,
of like
right.
500, and then also there are fewer voices in the room making the decision about that pot of funding versus like organizations that are interfacing every day and like was my pushback. I see what you're saying too.
But so, and then this one, the reason I'm being provocative, like I don't hold that view. I'm just being provocative in the sense that, as to triangulate on your point about do we want to have a tighter bridge where you say, actually no, if you've applied for this before, like we're not going to do this. That to me veers in that direction of you know, we're going to make the decisions on, you know, on what impact is or what in a way that I don't know if I feel totally comfortable
and
with.
that policy felt like it was more rooted in not wanting organizations to gain independence on the funding,
right,
and less about like, oh, we're doing the same thing, where I feel like I personally don't have a problem because operational funding is so hard to come by that that I think that it's super important that they. Like, I think that it's really valuable that we're a source of operational funding. And so it doesn't bother me that it's a recurring piece outside of that one conflicting part in the eligibility requirements that I think we should, like I'm not saying we get more stringent as much as, like, maybe, like, nix that part, you know? Just because we are seeing recurring needs, they're telling us what they need, and we have to trust them to know what they need.
And I will say that, I'm sorry, Dave, did you have something?
Discussion. I don't want to necessarily interrupt, but I wanted to comment on a couple of things that were said. So, do you want to just continue for a minute?
No, you're part of this conversation. It's unfortunate that we forgot that the Zoom was on.
Thank you for your honesty, Eddie.
With everything that's been said, I would say that the applications were really helpful this time around. Regarding the follow-ups, I think they're really useful to kind of drill down. I think that, and we should continue it as an option. It's like, I mean, I'm not sure I agree with thinking them of them as a failure necessarily.
Yeah.
Or is it more just a means to understand the organization or the needs of the organization? Because obviously some are self-evident.
Yeah.
Because they're well-established organizations that come back and they, you know, we know about them and we know their needs.
Right.
Others, new organizations, so it's not entirely clear exactly what they need and for what reason. And as Eddie said, I don't think it really biases because we didn't fund at least one of the organizations. I think that came in, you know, to elucidate more of their needs. I did want to say that the rubric The rubrics I found a little challenging just simply because it seemed maybe it's me, I was overinflating the scores. So it didn't really discern between the different applicants so well. But, it's good to have that comparator, certainly. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that it's like back to what you said. Clearly the need is out there in the community and we're not meeting it entirely. I mean, I think we do a pretty good job. I think this group has done a really good job. And Courtney, I think you did a fantastic job chairing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Your organization, because this is really kind of a tough group, to kind of, get through it all. But, I think at the council level, I think we ought to be at least thinking of Jack Hopkins raising the amount every year, and looking at it like almost like a, employee salary. Because, the inflation costs over the last few years has cut what we're allotted about 10%.
Yeah.
So growing, yet it's being cut and eroded just because of inflation. So we ought to at least keep up with inflation and therefore look at it as like a COLA increase for the Jack every year in the budget.
Yeah.
I think we consider that.
Yeah.
So anyway, great discussion. Thanks, everybody. That's all I got.
Thanks, Dave.
I
Thanks, Dave.
have one more provocation on this thread,
Okay.
which is, and this is I think building off of something that Cam and I have said the last couple of years. So on this thought of like increasing the amount, seeing the needs, impact, etc. We've tried a little bit to get people to coordinate. For example, when they do homelessness, we're like, are you doing the heading home plan or like whatever, right? We have things of that nature that we've attempted at. But what if you took an approach where you basically said, you know what, we are going to fund one thing relevant to homelessness, and whether that's a collaborative thing or an individual thing, and it can be up to $100,000 or something like that, like where we actually push people to, because of the fact that we have a lot of overlapping needs. I do find it interesting that, like just to think of last year, because it's an offensive example where it's like you have two organizations that basically want to do things with horses and recovery or something like that, and it's great. That's a fantastic approach, wonderful. But then we end up basically like comparing the two of them,
Right.
and then evaluating those in relation to each other. When would it be better for us to say, we're going to consider these in some type of complementary way? Is there some way to sort of actually, and the comment that I'm provoking here is, we've talked about, I always find it really interesting how few collaborative applications we get. And I don't know, especially because people could do a collaborative and another. I mean, we had
Right.
2 this year.
I was gonna say, this was our lowest year.
Yes, and last year we had 4, right? So we always get such a small amount of collaborative applications. And so I don't know if that's a outcome that we want to work towards, trying to, and again, I was being provocative. I'm not necessarily saying that the way you do that is say we're only going to do one thing for homelessness, so work together and ask us something. But maybe there's something like that we should be thinking about as a committee.
Well, just kind of, there are a couple of threads there that I want to pull in, but one of them, so Silver Linings, and I'm on their board, they applied this year. And I was like not in that process at all until like I got a panicked message from the ED at the last minute and was like, I got into the system. But we had talked about a collaborative project with MCHA and Silver Linings and how that would be more powerful than we're leveraging funds for similar cause, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of it was like the timing of when, like I knew about Jack Hopkins, but like obviously, but so it's like this example is kind of a poor one, but like I almost wonder if like the runway leading up to the application like period, if that was longer, it would provide, I think, more time for innovation and like collaboration, if we were able to get get that in front of them earlier.
Because we could start as soon as we have the budget allocation, like as soon as council votes on the budget in September, right? I mean, is that right? When do we vote on budget?
September. I think, do we finalize it in October? But I think we do the first vote.
But basically, we could have our first Jack Hopkins meeting then, you know, like it's where you start organizing and, you know, starting to reach out to organizations and telling people that it will be open at this time. Like, there's a lot of things we could do early on, you know.
I will say that collaborations should be happening before Jack Hopkins. I mean,
Well, there's that too.
I
Yeah.
run a big organization, right?
Yeah.
So maybe my experience is different from others, but you know, I'm reaching out, my team's reaching out to individual organizations and say, hey, you know, there's a property that we share, or there's something that we can do, and we want to work together on something, and then maybe Jack Hopkins comes around and we apply for something, right? So, I think that I don't think Jack Hopkins should be the incentive to collaborate. I think maybe that's something that the nonprofit network, I mean, there's the Nonprofit Alliance, there's something that Carrie brings people together. Maybe we should be coming together as organizations to speed date and say, hey,
Okay,
what
but-
can we work
but-
I
on?
mean, that would be amazing.
But counter to that is that,
Yeah.
like, using the example of homelessness, we know that a lot of these organizations are collaborating, so why aren't they
They are.
applying for, you know, knock it out at the park?
Probably because they don't have the bandwidth. Like I said, I run a big organization.
But then they're
I
all
can
applying
reach out.
individually.
It still takes more work to collaborate.
in like
Agree.
in working on a project is difficult. What we could do is in the rubric just flat out say don't differentiate collaborative projects and individual projects, and just get 5 more points for being a collaborative project. So you get bumped to
exactly.
the top.
Well, that's what I was
Like,
gonna say,
yeah.
do we wanna prioritize?
I mean, I think that would be a way where people are like, hey, I'm gonna call, so I used to call NCHA right on the phone and say, hey, let's just work on
But then
something
it does
together.
end up being the incentive. So to use that, like,
I'm fine with the incentive. I just think that, but I just think that if, like saying, hey, Jack Hopkins, we put the money out there, why don't you collaborate? We'll see what happens. But if we
Yeah.
flat out say, hey, you get 5 points for a collaboration, like you don't even have to.
Then is there a
Yeah.
moral hazard there that
I was gonna say, that gets tricky then though, if
just
it's not a
whoever?
great collaborative
Well,
project,
if
if
it's
it's
not,
not.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
kind of like forcing themselves into a.
Right.
Well, I mean, or if it's just something that we're like, this isn't the best use of our funds,
Oh yeah,
you know,
also that, yeah,
like,
that's fair.
Maybe 5 points isn't the right amount of points.
But just like weighting it, like.
yeah, the merit of
Mhm.
the project
Yeah.
still needs to.
Well, there's another part of this phenomena though, which
Yeah.
is that people are doing a collaborative project and they don't apply as a collaborative project. So they'll in their description be like, oh, we're working with this group and this group and this group, and that'll just be like, but we're asking for the money.
That's why I
Like,
had originally built community partnerships into the first draft of the rubric last year, because we
Right.
were seeing so much of that, and it felt like worth acknowledging.
Right.
Like they don't have a formal collaboration, but they
Right,
are
but they're
collaborating.
collaborating.
Maybe it's a
Like,
headache. I mean, it might be a headache for an organization to say, hey, we'll apply for the money and we'll work with you, versus like, hey, let's apply for the money and then split it up and
Yeah.
say, hey, you know,
Yeah.
your organization gets X amount. I mean, we do a lot of that, and then we end up subgranting.
But like
so.
also I feel like something that wasn't like, we took that community partnerships question out of the rubric, but I still think it's important for this reason too, because I feel like even if it's not a formal collaborative project, if that's a question we add to the application, then and they're talking about like exactly who they're working with on this specific thing they're asking for money for, then I
Yeah.
feel like they can get bonus points on
Yeah.
a version of the rubric that includes that as something that we care about. And it wouldn't be a bonus, it would just be like points
Yeah.
that they get, you know?
I do, so my take on the rubric, you know, I had a lot of, last year, when we did the rubric, I felt that there was, a few areas that were really, subjective, where I was kind of interpreting them maybe different than Cam would, and Isak was interpreting it differently, like we all had our own different interpretations. And I think that was ultimately okay, because it still helped us get to where we wanted to make our recommendations, but I still felt a little uneasy about that last year. We tightened it up this year. I think that really helped. I think we can go a little further with the rubric to.
We like neglected the scoring, like tightened up our
Yeah.
criteria, but then forgot about updating the
But
scoring.
yeah, I mean, every year, you know, they all do come within like a very small range within each other. It does help to see my priorities then, you know, to see how it all kind of comes together. But yeah, it should lead us, I think, a little bit further than it does. and really kind of set some of them further apart than they do. So
Mhm.
I would love to relook at that rubric, and then, think about things like, putting the collaborative ones on there.
Well, and I nerd out about this right now anyway, because I taught grant writing this past spring, and at the end I had them all write applications for social service organizations, and then they were divided into 4 7-people panels, and they had the same rubric that they worked from, and they all, they all interpreted those things differently, which was okay. Like, it wasn't necessarily like, no rubric is going to be perfect, but it wasn't necessarily like a flaw in the rubric. We developed it together as a class. It was like more just like, we're all going to see things differently no matter what. No rubric is ever going to be neutral. Like, I think anytime we're bringing it to the table for conversation, that it is doing its job, I guess.
Yeah.
And like, it's more just like, I think maybe the eligibility cutoff of like, we want this amount of impact to be demonstrated for them to be even considered, like that binary almost. Like, I just think it's really hard. Like, a rubric is just gonna look different and be interpreted differently.
Yeah.
Always based on.
Yeah, so that's why I don't want to, wring my hands over it too much. Because, like I said, it really did, I think, help each of us at least kind of get that base priority to be like, okay, now I have a better organizing of the grants, and now I can go through and order from like top to bottom or bottom to top or whatever. Like, I see, they're lined up a little bit more.
That's kind of how I feel about it too.
To help lay it out.
Like, yeah.
All right. Any other areas that we haven't mentioned?
I'm not even proposing this as much as just like want to offer it up as a point of discussion. I've been in a couple other grant panel processes, and something that happened for those, there were more applications, but it was like everyone like was assigned like a chunk of the applications that they did a deep dive on versus being responsible for deep diving on all of them. And so like a subset of us would be responsible for doing like 17, and then there would be multiple that did the same 17, but then like another group would do another 17, and then whenever the discussion period came, it was like like, we all are familiar, like, you're responsible for coming to the table familiar with the applications, so that way like you can have the discussion, but some people in the group know like these applications inside and out and can like contribute to the discussion. Some of those questions that come up that maybe we feel like we have to call them in later, and it's like buried somewhere deep in their application.
I love that.
So like maybe something to consider.
You become a subject expert on a couple.
Yeah.
So you can really kind of present to.
Because I feel like that's the part that gets hard, is there's so much content to go through.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if like that's something that would be helpful.
I like that idea.
So there are several categories that seem to come up that we fund, and one is food insecurities, a lot of housing instability stuff, which would include homelessness,
Right.
Children's stuff, right? Therapy, CASA, Boys and Girls Club. You mentioned arts, but we didn't have. I don't think we had anything with arts in there. Is Jack Hopkins arts? Do we
No,
anything?
we don't fund arts.
You don't
no.
fund arts, okay.
But I feel like the conversation gets different whenever you're like, it's not a basic
Yeah.
need being met,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we should think about saying, hey, look, I agree with Dave that, if we can increase Jack Hopkins, that's great. But say we're playing $500,000, then we can say that $100,000 goes through to child welfare. $100,000 goes to food insecurities. And if one category doesn't have as many applicants, then it gets split between the other categories, and then we fund accordingly. That would play into, hey, we can have a few people deep dive on a subsection of applicants, but it makes sense, right? All the housing insecurity folks can take a deep dive on that, food insecurity, as opposed to like, hey, just take 1 through 5, and then I'll take the next 5 or whatever.
It's interesting.
Divide them up by topic.
Yeah, and you may be able, if you do it that way, if people cycle off of here, you can bring in a food insecurity expert in on this, so that way they can take the deep dive on that section. You can bring in someone who is a child therapist to go into, hey, why is having a court-appointed special advocate important? This is this makes a lot of sense in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
I don't know though, I think it's hard to anticipate what the needs are going to be, so
It seems
I
like
think,
we have, I mean, we hit a lot of these categories, I mean,
yes,
there isn't a
but the
lot,
distribution of them, and so then it becomes arbitrary, like you end up defaulting back, like what is, you know, if we said, whatever, a third of our thing is homelessness, like, we'll get that many requests, and so, you know, it's you can't say, well, 5 requests is the minimum before it gets redistributed, because, you know, you might have 5 people all asking for $100,000, like,
Yeah.
you know, and so it just puts us back in this, like, essentially you're reducing the fund because people have a less of a space to move around in.
I also feel like based on how things are going economically, like, to your point, I think we do know, like, for the most part, but I do think, like, the asks, even within the types of organizations that are requesting funds, the asks are looking different, like, thinking about, like, Susie's Place and, like, these places that lost funding, federal funding this past year, and, like, things that, like, we don't know until they tell us, but that need, like, those are big asks that they had that maybe, like, we wouldn't have the funds to fund if we were, like, breaking up our fund into something
Yeah.
smaller, because we would be like, okay, we're used to only getting, like, $50,000 worth of asks for youth services organizations or something, but, like, Susie's Place asked for, like, whatever, 40,000 or whatever.
Maybe we need to put not a soft cap on what people can ask for again. It would.
I mean, we have to talk about that, which is like, do it, you know, you sort of say, you sort of have a, you know, you say this is the whole amount, and then the expected amount of awards, because that gives somebody a sort of idea of your average, you know, what you expect to give out. I mean, that's something we could communicate a little bit better.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, a lot of these organizations that ask for big amounts of money, the actual project description was, I mean, they broke it down like a lot of them did, but still, there's a lot of vagueness in there.
But I think it's been the other way because it's. I think our problem has actually been on the other side, and this is what I'll call the tandem problem. Same thing with New Hope for Families. You know, where they'll apply for $5,000 and then tell us that they have this $50,000 deficit, and when they come to the presentation, we'll be like, why didn't you apply for more? Mm-hmm. And we have to then, like, sort of tell them, like, no, we would have considered you for 50,000, or, you know, like. And you know, and so I do think that which isn't to say that we are saying we're going to give all of our awards this amount, or, you know, it's just a saying in general we expect to give, you know, 20 awards, you know, at $20,000, so it puts people in the right, you know, in the right ballpark or something like that. But
also, I just wonder, like, how, because Jack Hopkins has been around so long, and then some of these organizations have been applying for so long, if in, like, certain years, like, it was, an all or nothing approach to funding, that then they were like, oh, shoot, like, I would rather apply for less and get less than apply for more and not get anything kind of deal. Like, if that's ever been, like, the way that, like, I don't know.
It's hard when it changes every year.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I love the idea of us starting to message early, so that before they do the application, they know really what expectations are for that year, so that they can look at that and start thinking about, okay, how are we going to then match? They've told us what they're looking for. They told us what we need to do. I think if we do a better job at communicating earlier, that gives them more time to kind of get their cards right.
And I think now that we know this online system works and is more accessible, this is something else I noticed just from the state grant panel that I was on, is that, like, in each question they had it really broken down really specifically what they were looking for. And so I think that, like, that could help us too with that kind of, like, dilemma of, like, bringing them in, is, like, giving them more definition of what we want their answer to look like, to, like, tailor it to the information we feel like we need.
Right.
Because actually that is funny, and I feel like you might have said this earlier, but that is funny in the same way that we look at, like, lasting impact or whatever. All of us think about it differently. When they're answering that question, they're all thinking about it differently too.
Yeah, that's true. All right. covered a lot. Any last thoughts? Any other new can of worms we want to open up?
Yeah, I got a can.
Oh, good. Woo. I knew someone would.
It's an important segue or metaphor for, I want to talk about food for a minute, but growing food. We only had one applicant this time
Yeah.
that was proposing funding for food, and I thought it was a good applicant because they were not only producing food, but they were teaching how to grow.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a great skill that people can learn, especially kids, for self-reliance and, you know, plus they get nutrition. Anyway, I'm surprised we only have one applicant. Maybe we'll get more next year, but that's gonna compete with other needs that are gonna be probably continual, maybe greater, as was said, with the federal government shedding it to, you know, local government. And, you know, maybe this is another argument for more funding,
Yes.
because I think that I'd like to see that happen. I think that, you know, there are communities where, like in Detroit, where, you know, communities, they're growing food in neighborhoods, and they're helping to, you know, there's so many benefits from it. I don't need to go into all the benefits from that, but I'd like to see that happen here, and I think, you know, it could really take off, and I'd like to, but then again, you know, we have a lot of other needs, and we were talking about different categories, but this is another category that sort of, you know, maybe we haven't seen it very much in the past, but maybe it will grow.
Yeah.
So, just that comment. I also just wanted to say, you know, I learned so much from this group every time I participate, and I just want to thank everybody
Likewise.
for their collective knowledge adding to the group, because I learn a lot in the process. So. And I also wanted to thank Sophia for being there and her help.
Always.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Thank you, Dave. You brought up some good points. I mean, I agree. I think we're in a...
more money. I want more money for this.
Yeah, I think we're in a period right now where we know we're going to keep getting more and more need, right? And it's the unexpected fluctuations are coming up probably more than any other period, like in the Jack Hopkins, you know, era, at least in the past many years.
It's only gonna get worse.
So I think we do need to look for more money and be more nimble, right? And recognize we're gonna have a lot more ask, I think, and need.
I wonder what studies about this exist, like projecting what this is going to look like, because I don't even think we've gotten to the point where we're truly seeing the impact of federal cuts yet. And I feel like that is what we're going to start seeing next year and like in the subsequent years. And I wonder if there are like if anyone's has done like projections on.
I don't know, but with state cuts too, on top of all of it, you know, with SB1, you know, just there's going to be just a lot of tightening of belts and a lot more pain, unfortunately.
I had one more application thing that I just wanted to put on the radar. This was like the E-Verify. I think there were a lot of groups that didn't end up getting the E-Verify through, but since we didn't have like Kari like looking at that stuff, like it didn't end up mattering.
Right.
I think that's really hard. From what I heard from Rachel, the executive director of Silver Linings, who dropped out because she couldn't get E-Verified because it's an organization without a staff. That like that's a really, really hard, like if there's another way that we can go back to having them submit their IRS paperwork or something. I feel like that would be way better than E-Verify for the future.
Yeah, that was a pain point, as some may say, for sure. I mean, I want to just give some thank yous for this is my favorite committee that I sit in. This is my favorite part of city council, hands down, like in general. So I'm so grateful to be able to be part of it. Thank you all for your patience with me as I chaired this time, because we had really bad timing with losing all of our staff. So I went into a huge panic. I did not think we were going to pull this off. And because of Sophia's help and Larry's help and our interns and our fellows and then you guys, everybody just carrying everything. I think everybody pitched in remarkably, and I think I said this at the beginning, but I am very grateful and relieved that we pulled it off, but thank you to everybody. And I'm about to adjourn unless anybody wants to say anything.
Turn the
Just
way.
thank you again, Courtney,
Thank
for
you.
being our
I
fearless
love working
leader.
with you guys. This has been such a great experience for the past few years. So, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Yay.